Well, scenes of innocent people under siege are images we usually associate with war-torn areas of the world, but it happened right here in our own backyard.
This week marked the 6th anniversary of the so-called Tuhoe raids in Ruātoki, and reporter Te Rauhihi was in the tiny settlement for that milestone.
And he discovered the police may be long gone, but the sense of violation, hurt and anger still cuts deep.
Kua huri ngā tau. Kua noho tonu a hine pū kohurangi ki te whārua o Ruātoki. Me waua hoki te whakapono ki ngā āhuatanga I puta e ono tau ki muri.
First tonight, the anti-terror raids on our home patch.
There's been a huge police operation around the country and it's centred on the discovery in remote mountain ranges of what police say are guerrilla-style training camps.
Koe te he atu whare I tomo kia, I tāmaki makaurau, I pōneke, I wheatu. Hoi anō, ko Ruātoki anake te hapori I aukati marikatea e ngā prihimana. Ka mutu ahakoa he tangata whai ture, ka whakatūria, ka pātaitia, ka tirohia ngā waka me ngā whare.
I was one of the drivers. They did hop on our bus and they did search our bus.
Ko te mato toru o ngā prihimana I konei I te papawhutu pōro o tāne atua. Ka mutu ko te kura tuatahi kei kōtata mai, ko te huarahi hoki e haere atu ana ki Ruātoki. I whakaahuatia ngā prihimana e ngā tamariki, he ninja.
Koera te mamae, I tēnei rā I a tau ka hoki ngā whakaaro. I nā mahi taureka, nā mahi whakawhiu I wā mātou tamariki. Koinei e tahi waku kuia waku koraua.
Ko te Waiarani Harawira te mea pakeke o tōna reanga I tōna whānau, te kaumārima o ngā tuahine tungane, e whakapapa ana tōna whānau ki a Tuhoe. Ko tētahi o ngā tungane ko rāmeka me tana tama maraki I kawe atu e ngā prihimana. Koinei tā rau a whakamārama I runga I te paki pūmeka o Operation 8, no te tau 2000 te kaumātahi.
We had a house full of kids. So I come out to the front here. So they had all guns here, you know? With ski mask on, they got the guns and I come out with my hands up.
Taku haere ki reira, te pātai atu kei te aha taku tūnane e ahana. Kare kōrero mai aha te raru. Engari ka ki mai ki ahau. Ko haria taku tūnane ki Rotorua ki te prihimana. Te whakaaro tangata aroha pēr ki te he mahi tā rātau hei mahi, I te mahi rātau tā rātau mahi.
They left the house full of kids with no one to look after them. I tried to get my cousins next door. They said, no, you got to stay on their side of the fence.
It's a symbol of the wrongdoing of the government, of the Crown, to us from Tuhoe.
I te mohi o mātou he raihana tō rāmeka, o Wanapū. Ka takatana tama I raro I te rā raihana. He haere hoki ki te puhi kai I te awa. Engari I te rā wā, ka re tiro hia mai. Hoi anō tāte ture, ki te hari.
And these people, if found guilty, could be facing a lot more time in prison than they may have thought.
I konei ka whakatūria ngā motuka, ka karawhiua ngā pātai e ngā prihimana, ka tirohia e aiki ngā prihimana o te rāwā, mo tētahi mea e taunaki ana ai, he rōpū whakatumatuma, kei wainganu I a Tuhoe. Ko te Waiarani he kai ako kura o mua, he kai whakamahu ki hoki o mua mo te tāhuhu o te mātauranga, nā whai anō tana tere ki te whai whakaaro ki ngā tamariki.
Ka auna anō ki ngā mahi whakararuraru I ngā wairua I ngā hine anaro ngā tamariki. Kare moe te pō, ka mimi, ka meana, kua taru e kuia rātau anō. Kare moe o rātau rūma, kua tōia mai nā moena, kia moe tahite, katoa te whānau ki runei, ki te rūma kotahi. He wā tino mama e tino pauri, nā te mea Ka puta te rongo ki te ao. Ka titiro mai nā iwi o wahoke ki tōku whānau, ki taku iwi. Pēnei nā he Rātiku Pākehā, he terrorists mātou.
Neke atu i te torirau ngā primana i kōkiri atu ki ngā kāinga o Ruātoki. I te mutunga mai, toko whā anake ngā tāngata i mauheretia. Kei te anga whakamua i nāi nei. Kei te tiaki hoki a Tūhoe i tō rātauranga tiratanga.
What would happen now if they raided your school?
Don't want to do that, man. Don't want to do that. I'll just do my haka moves. We'll do our haka and we'll blow them away all the way to Australia.
He hauora tā wakuta mai ne tātaku whānau. Ko tūno atu tā rātau hauora i mua no atu i nā raru nei. Engari i taua wā. I taua wā Waimaria mātou i reira rātau.
Ko te kaukau o takapau te ratonga e kōrero tia nei. Me te hahoki koia ana kei te ratonga hauora i te motu, ko whakarite pānui e whakamaramana me pēhea ki ngā prihimana me ngā pahu kōpani. Kei puta anō tēnei āhua.
Ki oku whakaaro, tērā e tahi tamariki, tērā e tahi whānau, e kore e whitiora mai tērā kaupapa. Ka noho rātau me te wehi, me te pukuriri āke tonu atu.
Yes. We're proud to be Tuhoe, eh? Yeah. Now we are, because our koro tāmati went to stand up and fight.
Kei te hia nā pirimana i te mōhio, tēnā rātau ki te tuku kupu whakapāha ki whea kia wai, hea te pūtake, hea nā kōrero e tika ana ki roto, hea nā kōrero kāre pai ki roto. Me nā tūhe kei te hia kōrero kāpene heihana, ki nā tāngata i Pākia, hea te āhua o tērā.
Ko te tino mamai iaia nei, tēnei rani, ko mate taku tunane. Engari ko te wāhi ki taku tunane, ko tā mātau i mōhio ai, kāre o na hara, kāre o na hapa, i puta whānui tērā, i mua tana he mohana.
Nō reira, kimihia tētahi huarahi, e whiti atu ai mai te pauri ki te ao marama.
Ko pāpā tērā mokopuna he rua.
Engari mo te kuia nei, ko ngā mokopuna me te whānau hoki te aronga matua mā rātau.
Tērā tētahi kōrero. Kuira te whakatau ki o te kura o Ruatāhuna. Iti rea, ka hikatea ka tāia. Ka tāia e Tuhoe, ka kitea e Tuhoe. A kua hea ha te raru, ka kitea e ia he rongoa.
Nā, hei tā tāmati Kruger, mā ngai mō Tūhoe, ko te whakaaro ia, hei te marama o haki hea whakatūwhera hiai e Tūhoe tōna whare kauhanga nui a te uru taumatua. He whare tēnei e manawa kai roke ana ki te taiao, me te aha kei te tino whakamihia ngā āhuatanga whakahō, whakapihi, whakaauaha anō hoki o te whare nei. Ka tū tako te whare hei a pokapū whakahaere, pokapū whakaputu kōrero, pokapū hui hoki. Nā, ko te ariā ia kia tū a te uru taumatua hei tohu o te mana motuhake o Tūhoe ki tēnei ao tau whitiwhiti hou. I raro i tā rātou tāwharau kōrero, ko au, ko Tūhoe, ko au.
Thanks, Scotty. Well, as we've heard, many Ruātoki children were affected by the Tuhoe raids, yet little has been done to help them get over that traumatic experience. So joining me now is the head of the Department of Paediatrics at Auckland University, Professor Ines Asher, who's also a paediatrician, as I mentioned. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Sure.
With the focus on the community and on those four that stood trial, it's easy to forget that there were children that were essentially innocent victims of these raids. What would have been the impact on them?
Yes, for more than 6 years now, we've forgotten the children who were affected. So the stories keep on gradually coming out, but for example, one story was where 3 children were locked up at dawn with their mother in a shed and not offered any food or water, food or drink for 9 hours. They had to beg to go and use the toilet, and eventually when the armed police with guns let them go, they escorted them into the toilet in their own house. They had to beg to go to the toilet. They had to ask for food and were given none, while the policemen were actually fed themselves. So this is actually, must be one of the worst cases of child abuse by state authority figures in modern times. And I don't think most New Zealanders understand what's happened to those children. And there wasn't just one child, and that would have been terrible if there was, but there were many, many children affected.
That's a very strong statement, state abuse.
Well, I can't interpret it in any other way. If these children had been held by armed offenders in the same way, the state would have immediately rescued those children and given them some help and assistance. And the children would have been on the front page of the papers and on your lead news item. Because it was the state being the abuser here of the children, they've been hidden from view. In fact, it was only this year that a few of them spoke out in the Dominion Post.
Well, let's talk about what the response should have been in just a moment. Let's talk first about what the impact would have been on those kids and what the impact is now, actually.
Right. Well, many of them were taken away from their adult caregivers, their mums and dads or grandparents. Some of those were arrested and subsequently released. So they were trauma and being removed from their homes, shut up in a prison by people whose position they didn't understand, dressed up as the police were dressed, as you've seen on the TV program. So they would have been terrified. Because
what they would have had in front of them is men in balaclavas, in black suits with guns.
Correct, and they were terrified. They would have been terrified. And they would have had no understanding of what was going on. And then they would have felt the awful effects of struggling with their own body's need for food and needing to go to the toilet and the need for comfort, and none of this was provided by
because
this.
Because their caregivers are taken away. I
Yes,
guess,
and
we hear from the kuia in that story that a lot of the children suffered effects where they weren't able to sleep at night, where they were scared, where they were dragging mattresses in to be together at night so that they could sleep.
Some children have had terrible fear that's continued. Fear, lack of trust and and shame and lack of confidence. And some of them have had great difficulty returning to their homes or to their community. Just imagine if this had happened where I lived in Devonport, where the whole community was shut down and this kind of thing happened to a family or several families. This sort of thing would be unconscionable, but because it was Māori kids in a place that most people don't visit, they've been treated quite differently and with profound discrimination. So
what are you saying?
I'm saying there's profound institutional racism at play here in New Zealand society, that what happened that day is illustrative of that. This is happening right now, and that we need to really look at ourselves as a society, abide by all the things that we say that we want to abide by, like the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, where we treat all children with equal rights, all of our children exactly the same way. But no, somehow these kids were treated as much, much less than, and still now.
And so you feel they were abandoned?
They were abandoned by the state who abused them.
So what should have been the response? What should have been the immediate response? What should be the response now?
So sometimes traumatic situations happen that are hard to avoid children being caught up in them. The police do have some standards to follow. They didn't follow them on those days or that day. That they would need to it would have been great if the police had come back the next day dressed as ordinary policemen and said, hey, sorry that you guys are upset by this. This is what happens. This is who we are. Let the kids play with the uniforms, touch the guns, see that these were real people who hadn't meant to hurt them. That would have started to help for them to sort of make some sense of what had happened.
That didn't happen. What has happened is that there's been something of an apology. The Tāmati Kruger, as we saw in the story, says that he's been working with police to figure out what an official apology might be, and also whether there should be compensation. I mean, are those things going to make any difference now?
The children's psychosocial well-being has been profoundly affected here, and some children will be more resilient than others, but some will be continuing to live with fear, mistrust of authority figures and shame, and that can do awful things to you as you grow up. If kids end up in the youth justice system, will anyone be compassionate to know what they've gone through? I doubt it.
So what advice could you offer? I mean, we're waiting to see what's going to happen with an apology, we're waiting to see what's going to happen with compensation. In the meanwhile, the people of Ruātoki are still dealing 6 years on with the impact of those raids. And as we have talked about, so are the children. What advice could you give to those families now to get through?
I think the families are doing the very best that they can and have done since the raids, and I think there needs to be they need to work out what they feel would be best for the authority figures to, which I mean the government and the police, to redress what's needed. And it's a sensitive issue at this point in time, and I think that the help has been inadequate. So I think you'd really need to consult with the families themselves to help, and with appropriate health professionals in the psychological arena, for example.
Well, Professor, we thank you very much for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. It's Professor Ennis Asher from the Paediatrics Department at Auckland University there, Scotty.
Miriama kōrua ko te ahorangi tēnā kōrua. Nā, kua tata te tau mai o ngā waiwai ore hua ki raro. Nō reira, kua tīmata ke ētahi o tātou ki te whakawhai ti whakaaro ki te āhua o ngā kahu kaukau hei kuhu mārātau ki te puna kaukau te awa me te moana. Tērā tētahi pakihi kahu kaukau te rongonui haere I roto I te rāngai whatu pueru I Aotearoa nei me te awa nō hoki. I kōrero a Kane Peters ki te tohunga hoa hoa o taua pakihi. Arā, kia Sarah Jane Abraham o Ngāti Maru.
Okay, good to go. You know, like, dream big. Put it out there. You look amazing. See what happens.
And it's all happening for daughter of Ngāti Maru, Sarah Jane Abraham.
It's exceeded all of my expectations. It's growing so fast.
Sarah Jane is the director and designer of Surface Too Deep, a swimwear label that's dazzling the eyes of beachgoers locally and around the world.
We've got, I think it's up to 19 stockists in New Zealand. We're shipping out globally. I'm like, really? Like, don't you have swimwear over there? You're buying it from New Zealand. It's hilarious, but awesome.
Marae Investigates followed Sarah Jane backstage at this year's New Zealand Fashion Week as she showcased her swimwear for a second year in a row.
New Zealand Fashion Week, I just wanted to go there. That's, you know, like just to actually go and see a show. I didn't ever think that showing twice in a row was ever going to be possible.
Surface Too Deep was founded by Sarah Jane's design school friend Esther Bryant Lindsay of Ngaitahu. After joining the label last year, Sarah Jane has taken the reins as director and is amazed at how quickly the label is expanding.
One of our goals last year in about April was, we thought, oh, you know, 6 years' time, I reckon we could probably do New Zealand Fashion Week. And it was 6 weeks later we were showing at New Zealand Fashion Week last year.
After their first showing at New Zealand Fashion Week, Sarah Jane and Esther decided to try and push the label across the Tasman at Australian Fashion Week. They were stunned to even get a response.
We got an email from the producer saying, how would you like to show at Australian Fashion Week in 6 weeks' time? So, yeah, it was a bit scary. We had to do some fast talking, some fast thinking.
So surely with Surface Too Deep's success, Sarah Jane must be raking in the cash.
People expect you to be living that high life. I don't. I don't have all that money to throw around. Everything I do, I'm investing into the business, so any spare money, that's where it goes. It's the kind of industry that's really fickle as well. 1 minute you might be the hottest thing ever, next minute, oh no, someone else is bigger and better. You're constantly going to be on top of your game.
So how did Sarah Jane find herself on this path?
I grew up in Manaia, just out of Coromandel. I always remember my mum yelling at me, get out of the mirror. But it was more like I didn't have a mannequin, so I was the one just trying on different clothes, seeing what worked with what, you know, being my own stylist really. When I was about 18, I was given a sewing machine. Had some time on my hands and just ended up kind of spending my time sewing. I ended up bumping into an old school teacher, and she asked me where I got my dress from, and I was like, oh, you know, just made it. And so she kind of said, oh, you should think about going to university and doing it at university.
And that's exactly what Sarah Jane did. Now she's risking it all to pursue a dream she has no doubt will become reality.
It's the scariest thing I've ever done. You know, it sounds really silly. Realistically, what happens if the worst case scenario is the business fails, I do something else? Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I go, how am I going to do this? I think the hardest thing is you can't plan for anything. Like, you might think everything's absolutely sorted, and then some little thing or some big thing will happen where you've got to act within 24 hours or you miss an opportunity. And it's really about making the most of every single opportunity.
Making the most of every opportunity is paying off for Sarah Jane. Her label, Surface Too Deep, has been invited to show for a second time at Australian Fashion Week next April. And she's not letting anything get in her way.
A little secret motto of mine is fake it till you make it.
Yes, well, time to go to Willie Jackson now, our political commentator. Now, Willie, Professor Ina Sasha this morning when she was talking to Miriama, described the Tūhoe raids as institutional racism and state abuse. What do you think of that?
Well, some of us have been saying that since day one, so it's fabulous to hear a learned academic in Pākehā saying the same type of thing. And New Zealanders need to get their heads around that. You know, would they have closed down Remembered the way they closed down Ruātoki? Would they have closed down Devonport as she was saying? So it was good to hear. It was racism, institutional racism, and it still hasn't been properly addressed, actually. We still haven't had the apologies. I think there should be a government apology, because we're talking about the kids, Scotty. We're talking about kids who might be, and we heard this from the start, who could be affected for life. You know, they're seeing these guys with guns and all that. But at the time I was disgusted, and I had big fight with Greg O'Connor, who's the union boss for the police. And I said, name the other Pākehā town that you've treated like this. So fabulous to hear I think she's a professor, is she? The professor. And it validates a lot of what we've been saying for years. You've been saying
since October the 15th, 2008.
Absolutely. But not just me. There's a number of people have been saying, look, address this, treat our people properly. Let's not have a whole set of rules just for Māori and a different set of rules for Pākehā. So well done to the professor this morning.
Talking about sets of rules, now you know Len Brown very well. He's the mayor of Auckland, and of course you two have been friends for quite a while. He's been in the headlines all week. Yeah. Should he stay or should he go?
You know, initially I was quite relaxed about it. I don't know why, but maybe Māori men are... maybe I shouldn't have been relaxed about it, and I thought, oh, well, Len, he's mucked up. But you look at it, and then you talk to your wife, and then all the women start talking to you. A lot of women are really upset by it. And I try not to get morally, not judge his morals, not my business what happens with his wife and all that sort of thing. But the more you look at it, and the more I hear from others who say, and women in particular, that they might not have voted for him if they had known that, he was... up to what he was up to. And it wasn't not just a one-night fling, was it? We're talking about 2 years. 2 years, yeah. And so the more I thought about it, and I know there's this conspiracy going on, and Matt McCartan and John Tamahere talk about the plot from the other side, but it's the deception, isn't it, Scotty? And Len parades himself as the great Christian, the great family man, and the great husband.
So should he stay or go?
Oh, I think he should go.
I
think he should go. Whether he'll go or not is another story, because there's no doubt that they were up to no good on the other side. Polino and I'll make Cam Slater, but in their defence, Cameron Slater's defence, as he keeps saying, well, it still happened, whether there was any sort of plot or not. So just because there was some sort of conspiracy or carry-on happening doesn't mean it didn't happen. And a lot of our women, lots of women all around the country are violated by that. Len, you paraded yourself as the martyr. Maybe you should do the right thing now and stand down.
And the actual affair itself is sort of taking a back seat now, and what's come to the forefront is the free hotel rooms, providing references for Bevan Schwang and all that kind of stuff. That's the thing.
Well, it's the misuse of the position position. So I don't look at the affair. I'm not about to judge him on that. But did he misuse his position in terms of giving her a job, giving her jobs, giving her favours? You know, misuse of council officers and resources. You know, maybe Ngāti Whātua need to be a bit tougher about this. You know,
they want a new meeting with Ngāti Whātua.
Well, that's right. Hopefully, he wasn't wearing a korowai at the time, Scotty.
Hey, look, Jim made the step down this week as the CEO of Māori Television.
Yeah.
He's been there for 9 years. What's his legacy?
Well, when Jim came in, you know, you've got to remember we had a Canadian, right? We all thought this Canadian, well, they thought at the time the Canadian had the goods. He was a fraudster. He took over the CEO job. It was a total mess, Māori TV. And we were waiting for we thought there was someone with a great mana would take over, a matatau, an expert in the real Māori, well known in the Māori world, maybe a Scotty Morrison. But, you know, someone like Api Mahuika or somebody like that, or, you know, with all this mana. And in walked Jim Mather. No one knew him, no deal, no broadcasting experience, and he's done a great job. He's done a great job, Jim. And his legacy is the way he steadied the ship, how he got them competing with us. You know, they probably compete with us too much, but you know, he made them a player, and well done to him. I'm proud of Jim. You know, one thing with Jim, he went to school with us in Mangere, you know, and so great to see a Mangere boy having done so well. So Māori TV's on the way. It's going to be really interesting to see how we come about with that, you know, how we find our next CEO. But they got a lot to measure up with Jim, and of course he's going to Te Wānanga o Aotearoa.
And he'll go okay there, you think?
Well, it's a big challenge there. I'm going down to the Pōwhiri tomorrow. I'll give you apologies, Scotty, but you know,
some of us have to work.
That's our top. You know, they've got the most students in terms of Māori wānanga. So good luck to him. A great history, and we'll see who gets the job. Maybe you'll chuck your name in, Scotty.
I agree. He's been absolutely fantastic for Māori
Maybe
television.
out on the
Don't forget, of course, the big news from yesterday is that Te Aroha won the iwi of Origin Golf Championships.
Yeah. No one's interested, Scotty.
Over to you, Miriam. Over to you.
News of the day, Scotty. If you want to comment on this week's show, head to our website, tvnz.co.nz/Marae Investigates, or join us on our Facebook page. Now, next week on the show, our intrepid reporter Carmen Parahi brings us another exclusive. Marae Investigates goes inside the walls of Auckland Prison to find out about Te Piriti, an innovative rehabilitation program for child sex offenders.
Next week on Marae Investigates, an exclusive. We're inside Te Piriti, the high-risk child sex offenders unit in Auckland Prison. The 60 men here of all ethnicities use tikanga Māori to help them stop their offending against children. But is it working?
The therapy mixed with the Māori cultural stuff that we get here gives you a much greater perspective on what you've done, like you're offending.
It's a great victory.
All right, thanks, Rick. He just can't stop
Still talking about the golf.
Stay tuned for Wakahuia, where they travel to Mahia Peninsula to catch up with veteran broadcaster Derek Fox.
Papaki kaua te tai o mihi ki a koutou I tahuri mai tēnei ata ngā tau whirotanga o te wā.